The massive ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. Not one or two vessels, but an entire fleet that blocked out the sun over major cities. The ships were unlike anything humans had seen before. They looked like giant crystals floating in space, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that hurt to look at directly. People stopped on sidewalks and pointed up. Traffic came to a halt as drivers got out of their cars. Children pressed their faces against school windows. The world held its breath and waited. Ambassador Zethkar stood on the bridge of the flagship, looking down at the blue planet below. The crystalline being was tall and thin, made of what looked like living glass. Light moved through his body in patterns that showed his emotions. Right now, those patterns showed confidence and mild annoyance. Such a small world, he said to his aide. And yet they refused to see reason. 3 days earlier, Earth had received the message. It came through every communication device on the planet at the same time. Televisions, radios, phones, computers, everything that could receive a signal suddenly carried the same announcement in every human language. The message was simple. The Galactic Hegemony, representing 12 advanced species across known space, was offering Earth a place in their organization. Earth would receive protection, guidance, and access to advanced technology. In return, humanity would follow the rules set by their new galactic neighbors. It was not a request. It was an order. Earth had 30 days to accept. President Martinez sat in the emergency meeting room beneath the White House. Leaders from every major nation joined by video link. The mood was tense but not panicked. Humanity had been preparing for this day since first contact 5 years ago. What do we know about these hegemony forces? Asked the British Prime Minister. General Hayes, head of the Global Defense Initiative, cleared his throat. Our intelligence suggests they have never been refused before. Every species they approach either joins willingly or gets forced to join after a demonstration of power. And if we refuse? Asked the Chinese president. They will use what they call corrective measures, Martinez replied. We believe that means military action. The Russian president leaned forward on his screen. Our answer remains the same as we discussed. We do not bow to threats. Around the table and on the screens, heads nodded. The decision had been made before the aliens even arrived. Earth would remain free. Dr. Sarah Chen, head of the xenobiology department, had spent years studying the few alien species humanity had encountered. She knew more about galactic politics than almost any other human. The hegemony sees us as children, she explained to the assembly. They think we are too young and too violent to govern ourselves. They believe they are helping us. Are they right? Asked the Japanese emperor. Chen smiled grimly. They think they know us because they have studied our history. They see our wars and conflicts and assume we are primitive. What they do not understand is that those same conflicts taught us things they never learned. The message went out to the hegemony fleet the next day. Earth politely declined their offer. The response was professional but firm. Humanity would chart its own course among the stars. They looked forward to peaceful relations with all galactic species, but they would not surrender their independence. Zethkar received the message while standing in his garden aboard the flagship. The garden was a marvel of crystal engineering, with light-based plants that grew in impossible geometric patterns. He read the human response 3 times before he understood it. They had said no. Impossible, he whispered to himself. His aide, a younger crystalline being named Veltar, approached carefully. Ambassador, the council wishes to know how we should proceed. Zethkar turned away from his garden. The light patterns in his body shifted to show confusion and anger. No species has ever refused our protection. Not in 3,000 years of galactic expansion. Perhaps they do not understand the benefits, Veltar suggested. Or perhaps they do not understand the consequences, Zethkar replied darkly. He called for an immediate meeting with the council leaders. The holographic forms of 11 other alien commanders appeared in his command chamber. Each species looked different. Some were energy beings, others were plant-like creatures. And a few looked almost human except for extra limbs or different colored skin. The humans have rejected our offer, Zethkar announced. Admiral Kreshta of the warrior Maktol species snarled, showing teeth like razors. Then we show them the error of their ways. Send a battle group to their largest cities. They will surrender within hours. No, said Counselor Yathara, an energy being that spoke in musical tones. These humans are new to space travel. They may not understand what it means to refuse the hegemony. Send a smaller force to demonstrate our power. They will see reason. Zethkar considered this. The Velthari were known for their patience and wisdom. Perhaps a gentle demonstration would be enough. Very well. 3 ships to orbit their largest population centers. Fire warning shots at uninhabited areas. Show them what our weapons can do. But as the meeting continued, Zethkar felt a strange unease. Something about the human response bothered him. Most species begged for mercy when the hegemony arrived. Others tried to negotiate. A few attempted to hide. Humans had done none of these things. They had simply said no, and explained their position like they were declining an invitation to dinner. There was something unsettling about that level of calm. 3 hours later, the warning demonstration began. Hegemony ships moved into position over New York, London, and Beijing. Their weapons charged with energies that could level mountains. The plan was simple: fire into the ocean near major cities, creating massive waterspouts that would show the power of hegemony technology without killing anyone. The first ship fired its main cannon at the Atlantic Ocean, 50 miles from New York. The blast created a column of water that could be seen from space. It was an impressive display designed to make humans understand their situation. The response was not what anyone expected. Instead of panic or immediate surrender, Earth's defensive systems activated. Satellites that had seemed harmless suddenly revealed themselves as weapons platforms. Ships that looked like space debris uncloaked and took defensive positions. The entire solar system lit up with energy signatures that made the alien sensors scream warnings. Zethkar stared at his displays in shock. Where their intelligence had shown a primitive species with limited space capability, they now saw a defensive network that rivaled the greatest military powers in the galaxy. "How is this possible?" he whispered. His aide was frantically working at a control panel. "Ambassador, we are detecting over 2,000 combat vessels in this system. Our initial scans showed less than 50, 2,000. Zethkar's light patterns shifted to show fear. "That is impossible. They have only had faster-than-light travel for 5 years." On the planet below, President Martinez stood in the Global Defense Center, watching as humanity's hidden strength revealed itself. For years they had prepared for this moment. They had built their defenses in secret, disguising military installations as civilian projects and hiding weapons among the asteroids. "Send a message to the hegemony fleet," Martinez ordered. "Tell them we appreciate their demonstration, but Earth remains firm in its decision. We hope they will respect our choice and leave peacefully." The message was broadcast on all frequencies, calm and polite as before, but this time, it came with an escort of 20 human destroyers that had appeared from nowhere and were now flanking the alien ships. Zethkar realized that everything the hegemony knew about humanity was wrong. These were not primitive children playing with advanced toys. They were something else entirely, a species that had taken 5 years of peaceful contact and used it to become a military power that could challenge the greatest force in the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galactic hegemony had encountered a species that was not impressed by their power, and for the first time in his long life, Ambassador Zethkar began to wonder if the hegemony had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Kreshta stood in the war room of the hegemony battleship Thunder of Worlds. The massive Maktol warrior was 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like armored plates. His species had conquered 17 star systems before joining the hegemony, and he had never lost a battle. 300 ships, he growled to his staff. More than enough to teach these humans proper respect. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Sol system was impressive even by hegemony standards. Massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets, fast attack ships that moved like deadly insects, support vessels carrying weapons that could boil oceans. It was the same force that had brought down the proud Xanthari Empire in a single day. Kreshta expected this to take an hour at most. The human response to the fleet's arrival was broadcast across all frequencies. A woman's voice, calm and professional, spoke for all of Earth. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Hegemony vessels, you are entering our space without permission. Please state your intentions." Kreshta laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Their space? They claim ownership of this entire system after 5 years among the stars." He opened a channel to respond. "Human vessel, I am Admiral Kreshta of the Galactic Hegemony. You have rejected our generous offer of protection. We are here to correct that mistake." "Admiral Kreshta, we have rejected nothing. We have chosen to remain independent. Please respect our decision and withdraw from our territory. The alien admiral's four hands clenched into fists. No one spoke to the hegemony this way. You have 60 seconds to surrender unconditionally, or we will take whatever actions are necessary to restore order. The channel went silent for exactly 60 seconds. Then Admiral Chen's voice returned. Very well, Admiral. We cannot allow your fleet to threaten our worlds. You are ordered to leave immediately, or we will consider your presence an act of war. Kreshta roared with laughter. The idea that humans could threaten his fleet was absurd. Open fire on their outer settlements. Show them what happens to those who defy the hegemony. The order went out to the fleet. 3 massive dreadnoughts turned their main weapons toward the human colonies on the outer planets. The guns charged with enough energy to destroy entire cities. Then something impossible happened. The space around the hegemony fleet exploded into light and chaos. Ships appeared from everywhere. Behind asteroids, from within the planetary rings, from locations that sensors had shown as empty space moments before. They were not the crude vessels that hegemony intelligence had reported. These ships moved with precision and speed that made veteran hegemony pilots nervous. Contact, shouted the sensor operator. Multiple vessels decloaking. Count is over 1,500 ships. Kreshta stared at his displays in disbelief. The numbers kept climbing. 2,000 ships. 3,000. Ships that ranged from small fighters to massive carriers that rivaled hegemony dreadnoughts in size. Impossible, he whispered. Our intelligence showed they had barely 50 combat vessels. His aide, a younger Maktol named Vortek, was working frantically at his station. Admiral, these ships are using stealth technology beyond anything in our databases. They have been hiding throughout this system, waiting for us. The first exchange of fire began when a hegemony destroyer fired on what it thought was a lone human patrol ship. The human vessel absorbed the blast with shields that flared and held. Then it returned fire. The alien destroyer simply vanished, not destroyed in a spectacular explosion. It just disappeared as if it had never existed. The human weapon had done something that physics said was impossible. What was that? Kreshta demanded. His science officer was staring at her instruments in confusion. The energy signature suggests some kind of phase disruption weapon. It shifted the target out of normal space-time. That technology does not exist. It does now, Admiral. The battle that followed was unlike anything in hegemony history. The humans did not fight like any species the aliens had encountered. They did not charge bravely into battle like the Maktol. They did not use overwhelming technology like the Velthari. Instead, they fought with a combination of precision, creativity, and ruthless efficiency that caught the hegemony completely off guard. Human fighters moved in patterns that seemed random, but always ended with alien ships in perfect positions for ambush. Their larger vessels appeared to predict where hegemony ships would be, not where they were. Some human weapons passed straight through hegemony shields as if they did not exist. Others turned the aliens' own technology against them. Captain Velkor of the hegemony cruiser Eternal Glory watched in horror as human ships swarmed around his vessel. They were not trying to destroy his ship. They were disabling it piece by piece, targeting specific systems with surgical precision. They are cutting through our hull, his engineer reported. But the cuts are not random. They are accessing our computer systems. Before Velkor could respond, his ship's own defenses turned against the hegemony fleet. The Eternal Glory began firing on its former allies, its weapons controlled by some kind of human computer virus. Across the battle, similar scenes played out. Hegemony ships found their communications jammed, their sensors blind, their weapons turned against them. The humans were not just fighting the alien fleet. They were taking it apart like mechanics working on broken machinery. Admiral Kreshta tried to rally his forces, but the battle was already lost. In 2 hours, the mighty hegemony fleet had been reduced to scattered groups of damaged ships fleeing toward the edge of the system. How many ships have we lost? He asked his aide. Vortek checked his displays with shaking hands. 47 destroyed, 93 disabled and captured. The rest are damaged and barely able to fight. And the humans? 12 ships lost, 34 damaged but still operational. Kreshta felt something he had never experienced before, complete and total defeat. Not just a tactical loss, but a demonstration that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. The communication channel opened again, and Admiral Chen's voice filled the hegemony command ship. Admiral Kreshta, we have disabled most of your fleet. Your survivors are free to leave our space immediately. Any ships that remain in the Sol system in 1 hour will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. You cannot do this, Kreshta stammered. The hegemony will send more fleets. Larger fleets, that is your choice, Chen replied calmly. But before you leave, we want you to understand something. Humanity has been at war with itself for most of our history. We have learned things about conflict that you cannot imagine. We know how to fight enemies who are stronger, faster, and more advanced than we are. We know how to turn technology against those who created it. Most importantly, we know that the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemy never wants to fight you again. The channel closed, leaving Kreshta alone with the wreckage of his pride and his fleet. As the surviving hegemony ships limped away from Earth, they carried with them something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, the knowledge that the supposedly invincible hegemony could be defeated. And not by some ancient, powerful species, but by a young race that had been in space for less than a decade. The news spread through the hegemony's communication networks like wildfire. On worlds throughout the galaxy, species that had lived under alien rule for centuries began to ask a simple question. If humans could defeat the hegemony, what did that mean for the rest of them? In the depths of space, in hidden colonies and forgotten worlds, beings who had given up hope of freedom began to remember what it felt like to dream of independence. The galaxy was about to change, and it had all started with humanity's simple refusal to bow down to those who claimed to be their betters. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as her strike force moved through the asteroid field at the edge of the Rigel system. 6 months had passed since the hegemony's failed attack on Earth, and now humanity was taking the fight to their enemies. Sensor contact, reported Lieutenant Torres from his station. 3 hegemony supply convoys, just like intelligence predicted. Chen nodded. The humans had learned much from studying the captured alien ships. They now understood hegemony logistics, communication protocols, and, most importantly, their weaknesses. Begin Phase 1 of the operation. What happened next was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a surgical dismantling of the enemy force by beings who had turned warfare into an art form. The human ships did not announce themselves or demand surrender. They simply appeared among the hegemony vessels like ghosts materializing from empty space. Their stealth technology had advanced far beyond what they had used to defend Earth. These ships were invisible until they chose to be seen. The first the hegemony crews knew of the attack was when their ship's systems began shutting down one by one. Lights went out. Gravity failed. Life support stopped working. The humans had developed computer viruses that could infect alien technology and turn it against itself. Within minutes, the entire convoy was disabled and helpless. Broadcasting surrender demands now, reported Communications Officer Park. The response came quickly from the lead hegemony vessel. This is Captain Velandra of the supply ship Endless Bounty. We surrender. Please do not destroy us. Chen opened a channel to reply. Captain Velandra, this is Captain Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Your ships will be boarded and searched. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Any attempt to resist will result in the immediate destruction of your vessels. What followed was a systematic capture of 3 supply convoys carrying weapons, supplies, and information to hegemony worlds throughout the sector. The humans took everything they needed and released the alien crews and escape pods with enough supplies to reach friendly space, but the most important part of the operation was what happened next. Are the communication arrays ready? Chen asked. Yes, Captain, Torres replied. We have tapped into their entire network. Chen smiled. This was the real purpose of the mission. The supply ships carried communication equipment that linked them to every hegemony world in the sector. By capturing those systems intact, humanity now had access to the aliens' own communication network. Begin the broadcast. Across 17 star systems, on worlds where alien species had lived under hegemony rule for generations, every communication device suddenly carried the same message. It was spoken in dozens of languages by human voices that were calm, confident, and impossible to ignore. Citizens of the galaxy, the message began. We are the people of Earth. 6 months ago, the galactic hegemony came to our world and demanded our surrender. We refused. They sent a fleet to force us into submission. We destroyed it. On the world of Talarka, In the underground warrens where the native species had been forced to live after their conquest, workers stopped their mining operations to listen. On the ocean world of Aquanus, where the fish-like Mertai had been slaves for 2 centuries, entire schools of beings rose to the surface to hear the broadcast. We know that many of you have lived under hegemony rule for so long that you have forgotten what freedom looks like. We are here to remind you that no species has the right to rule over another. No government has the authority to demand submission from those who do not choose to give it. The message continued for 20 minutes, explaining humanity's philosophy of freedom and independence. It talked about the right of every species to govern itself, to make its own choices, and to stand as equals among the stars. Most importantly, it offered help. To any species that wishes to throw off the chains of oppression, we offer our assistance. We will share our technology, our knowledge, and our strength with those who choose to fight for their freedom. The galaxy belongs to all of us, not just to those who claim the right to rule it. The reaction was immediate and electric. On worlds throughout hegemony space, beings that had lived in submission for generations began to remember what it felt like to dream of something better. The first rebellion started on Keth Moor, a desert world where the reptilian Shardai had been forced to mine rare crystals for their hegemony overseers. The miners simply stopped working and demanded their freedom. When hegemony security forces tried to restore order, they found that their weapons and vehicles had been mysteriously sabotaged. Human advisors had arrived in the night, teaching the rebels how to use the aliens' own technology against them. Impossible, muttered Counselor Yathara as she reviewed the reports flooding in from across hegemony space. The energy being's musical voice was discordant with stress. 17 worlds are in open rebellion. Our forces are stretched thin trying to maintain order. Ambassador Zethkar stood in his chamber aboard the flagship, watching the tactical displays with growing horror. The light patterns in his crystalline body showed fear and confusion. It is worse than that, he said quietly. The humans are not just encouraging rebellion. They are actively supporting it. The evidence was undeniable. Human ships appeared wherever there was trouble, bringing weapons, supplies, and expertise to rebel forces. They fought with a combination of advanced technology and dirty tactics that made them nearly impossible to defeat. More importantly, they seemed to understand exactly how to hurt the hegemony where it mattered most. On Velthara Prime, the crystal gardens that had taken millennia to grow were somehow infected with a virus that turned them into communication devices for the rebellion. On the war world of Maktol, weapons factories found their assembly lines reprogrammed to produce equipment for rebel forces instead of hegemony troops. But perhaps the most devastating human tactic was their use of information warfare. Every secret the hegemony had tried to hide, every crime they had committed in the name of order, was suddenly broadcast across the galaxy for all to see. They have access to our most classified files, reported Intelligence Director Keltarum, his insectoid features twitching with nervousness. They know about the purge of Antares, the slave camps on Xerion, the experiments on Teleria 7, everything. Zethkar closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 3,000 years of hegemony rule crashing down around him. How is this possible? How can one species cause so much chaos? His aide Veltar approached carefully. Ambassador, I have been studying their methods. I believe I understand their strategy. Explain. The humans are not trying to conquer us, Veltar said slowly. They are trying to make us irrelevant. Every world that rebels becomes independent. Every species that throws off our rule becomes an ally of Earth. They are not building an empire to replace ours. They are building a network of free worlds that have no need for us at all. The truth of this statement hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The hegemony existed because other species needed their protection and guidance. But if those species could protect and guide themselves, what purpose did the hegemony serve? On Earth, President Martinez stood in the Global Defense Center, watching reports from across the galaxy with satisfaction. The plan was working better than anyone had dared to hope. How many worlds are now in open rebellion? She asked General Hayes. 43 and counting, he replied. The hegemony is pulling forces from the outer rim to deal with uprisings in the core systems. Their entire military structure is collapsing, and our advisors? Performing admirably. Captain Chen's strike force has liberated 6 supply convoys this week alone. The rebels are well equipped and well trained. Martinez nodded. Humanity had learned an important lesson from their own history. The best way to defeat an empire was not to replace it with another empire, but to make the very idea of empire obsolete. "Send a message to all our field commanders," she ordered. "Phase 3 of the operation begins tomorrow. It is time to show the galaxy what happens when free people stand together." Across the stars, human ships moved into position for the next phase of their campaign. They carried no weapons of mass destruction, no planet-killing devices, no instruments of conquest. Instead, they carried something far more dangerous to the established order: the tools and knowledge needed to help other species govern themselves. The galactic hegemony was about to learn that there was something more powerful than any fleet, more devastating than any weapon, and more dangerous than any army. It was the simple idea that every being in the galaxy had the right to be free, and that some people were willing to fight to make that idea a reality. The message arrived on Zirion 7 during the third shift, when most of the mining slaves were supposed to be sleeping in their cramped quarters. Jaktar, a member of the beetle-like Krix species, was huddled with 5 other workers around a smuggled communication device when the transmission began. "This is Captain Martinez, of the Free World's Liberation Fleet," the human voice said in perfect Krix-clicking language. "We know you are listening. We know you have suffered under hegemony rule for over 400 years. We are here to tell you that your suffering can end." Jaktar felt his carapace tingling with an emotion he had almost forgotten: hope. Around him, his fellow workers leaned closer to the small device that could mean their deaths if discovered by the overseers. "Tomorrow at dawn, when the shift changes, we want you to look to the eastern mountains. You will see a signal, 3 bright flashes of light. When you see that signal, it means your freedom has arrived." The transmission ended, leaving the workers in stunned silence. For 4 centuries, the Krix had labored in the deep mines of Zirion 7, extracting rare elements for the hegemony war machine. They had been told that they were the property of their betters, that their lives had meaning only in service to the greater galactic order. Now, beings from a species they had never heard of were telling them something different. At dawn, Jaktar stood with 3,000 other Krix workers on the elevated platform, where they received their daily work assignments. Overseer Veldranis, a tall Velthari crystal being, was explaining the new quotas when the eastern sky suddenly blazed with light. 3 brilliant flashes, visible even in the morning sun. What happened next would be remembered in Krix history as the Day of Rising. Instead of dispersing to their work assignments, every Krix worker on the platform began to sing. It was an ancient song that their grandparents had taught them, about the time when their people ruled their own world and made their own choices. Veldranis tried to restore order, activating his sonic weapons and calling for security reinforcements. But the weapons that should have controlled the crowd were silent. During the night, human infiltrators had sabotaged every control device on the planet. The rebellion spread like wildfire. On mining platforms across the world, Krix workers put down their tools and walked away from their assignments. When hegemony security forces tried to stop them, they found that their vehicles would not start, their weapons would not fire, and their communication systems were broadcasting human propaganda instead of orders. By sunset, the entire planet was free. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as the human-inspired revolution gained momentum. On the ocean world of Aquanis, the Murtai used their mastery of water to flood hegemony administrative centers. On the forest world of Sylvana, the plant-like Verdani simply stopped producing the food that fed half the hegemony fleet. But perhaps the most shocking rebellion came from an unexpected source. High Admiral Thexaria had served the hegemony faithfully for 200 years. The tall, graceful being with moth-like wings commanded the Third Fleet and had put down dozens of rebellions throughout her long career. She believed in the hegemony's mission of bringing order to chaos and civilization to primitive worlds. That belief died the day she received new orders from Hegemony Command. "You are ordered to proceed to the Talarka system," the message read. "Rebel forces have taken control of the mining operations. You are authorized to use any means necessary to restore order, including orbital bombardment of population centers." Thexaria read the orders 3 times before the full meaning sank in. They were ordering her to destroy cities full of civilians, not military targets, not rebel strongholds, but homes where innocent beings lived and worked and raised their children. She had always told herself that the hegemony's methods were harsh but necessary, that the suffering they caused was justified by the peace they maintained. But this order forced her to confront a terrible truth. The hegemony maintained peace only by threatening to murder anyone who dared to want something better. That night, Thexaria made a decision that would change galactic history. Instead of bombing Talarka, she transmitted the hegemony's attack orders to the Human Liberation Fleet. Then she took her entire battle group and defected to the rebellion. "This is High Admiral Thexaria of the Third Fleet," she announced on all frequencies. "I can no longer serve an organization that orders the murder of innocent civilians. I hereby offer my ships and my loyalty to the Free Worlds Alliance." The defection of an entire hegemony fleet sent shockwaves through both sides of the conflict. For the rebels, it meant they suddenly had access to advanced warships and experienced crews. For the hegemony, it meant that their own forces could no longer be trusted. Ambassador Zethkar stood in his private chamber, staring at the reports that flowed in with each passing hour. 67 worlds in open rebellion. 11 hegemony fleets had either defected or been destroyed. Supply lines were cut, communication networks were compromised, and government facilities were falling to rebel forces faster than they could be reinforced. "How did this happen?" he asked Veltar, his faithful aide. 3 months ago, we controlled half the galaxy. Now we cannot even maintain order in our own core systems. Veltar had been studying human tactics and philosophy during the crisis, trying to understand their enemy. "I believe the humans have done something that we never anticipated," he said slowly. "They have turned our greatest strength against us, and what do you mean?" "For 3,000 years, the hegemony has maintained control by convincing other species that they need our protection. We told them they were too weak to defend themselves, too primitive to govern themselves, too chaotic to maintain order without our guidance. We made them dependent on us." Zethkar's light patterns showed confusion. "Yes, and it worked perfectly. Until the humans proved it was all a lie," Veltar continued. "When they defeated our fleet at Earth, they showed every species in the galaxy that the hegemony was not invincible. When they taught rebels how to fight, they proved that other species could defend themselves. When they helped worlds form their own governments, they demonstrated that aliens could rule themselves perfectly well without our guidance." The truth hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The humans had not defeated the hegemony through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had defeated it by exposing its fundamental lie, that the galaxy needed rulers and subjects, masters and slaves. "What do we do?" he whispered. Before Veltar could answer, an alarm began blaring throughout the ship. The bridge officer's voice came over the communication system. "Ambassador, we are detecting multiple human ships approaching our position. They are requesting permission to come aboard." Zethkar felt his courage failing. After months of defeats and disasters, the idea of facing human officers filled him with terror. "Tell them we surrender," he said quietly. "Sir, you heard me. We surrender. Order all remaining hegemony forces to cease hostilities immediately." An hour later, Zethkar stood in his receiving chamber as Captain Sarah Chen and her diplomatic team came aboard. The human woman was smaller than he had expected, with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. She was accompanied by representatives from 6 different rebel species, all of whom treated her with obvious respect and friendship. "Ambassador Zethkar," Chen said with a polite nod. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Captain Chen," Zethkar replied, his voice weak. "I suppose you have come to discuss the terms of our surrender." Chen looked surprised. "Surrender?" "Ambassador, we are not here to accept your surrender. We are here to offer you something much more valuable." "I do not understand." "We are here to offer you and your people a place in the Free Worlds Alliance. As equals, not as rulers or subjects." Zethkar stared at her in shock. After everything that had happened, after all the suffering and conflict, the humans were offering peace. Not conquest, not revenge, but a chance to start over as partners rather than masters. For the first time in months, the light patterns in his crystalline body showed something other than fear and despair. They showed hope. Outside the ship, the galaxy was transforming. Worlds that had been slaves for centuries were learning to govern themselves. Species that had been enemies for millennia were discovering they could be friends. And at the center of it all, a young species that had refused to bow down to their betters was teaching everyone else that the galaxy was big enough for all of them to stand tall. The age of the galactic hegemony was ending. The age of the Free Worlds Alliance was about to begin. 6 months after the end of the galactic hegemony, Ambassador Zethkar stood in the gardens of New Geneva, watching human children play with alien younglings under the warm Earth sun. The crystalline being had never imagined he would find peace on the world that had started the revolution that destroyed everything he once believed in. "Strange, is it not?" said a voice behind him. Zethkar turned to see Admiral Chen approaching through the flowering pathways. The human woman wore civilian clothes now, having retired from military service to help establish the new galactic government. "What is strange, Admiral? That it took a war to teach us how to have peace." Chen joined him on the observation platform that overlooked the valley where the Free Worlds Alliance had built its headquarters. The building was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Not a massive structure designed to intimidate, but a series of connected pavilions that reflected the architectural styles of dozens of different species. "I have been thinking about that," Zethkar admitted. For 3,000 years, the hegemony believed that peace could only be maintained through strength and fear. We thought that if we were not in control, chaos would follow. And what do you think now? Zethkar gestured toward the gardens around them, where beings from 50 different worlds worked and played together in harmony. "I think we confused control with cooperation. We thought order meant everyone following the same rules, when what it really means is everyone agreeing to respect each other's differences." The transformation of the galaxy had been remarkably swift. Once the hegemony's military power was broken, the political structure collapsed almost overnight. But instead of the chaos that many had predicted, something beautiful had emerged from the ruins. The Free Worlds Alliance was not a government in any traditional sense. It was more like a voluntary association of independent species who had agreed to help each other when needed, and to respect each other's sovereignty at all times. There were no emperors or overlords, no supreme councils or ruling classes. Instead, there were representatives from each member world who met regularly to discuss common concerns and coordinate mutual aid. "How many worlds have joined now?" Zethkar asked. 237, Chen replied with obvious pride. "More applications arrive every week. The Velthari crystal being found, this number almost impossible to believe." The hegemony had controlled 12 species directly and hundreds more as client states. But those relationships had been based on fear and dependency. The alliance was based on something much stronger: the simple recognition that every species had something valuable to contribute to the galactic community. "Tell me about the Sol Doctrine," Zethkar said. He had heard of this new principle that guided alliance policy, but he wanted to understand it better. Chen's expression grew serious. "The Sol Doctrine is simple. Any species that attempts to forcibly subjugate another will face the combined defensive power of the alliance. We will not allow another hegemony to rise. But what about species that genuinely cannot defend themselves? What about primitive worlds that need guidance? We help them," Chen said firmly. "But we help them become strong enough to stand on their own, not dependent on us for their survival. The goal is always independence, never domination." This philosophy was already being tested across the galaxy. On the Outer Rim, the Alliance had encountered the Zarketh Empire, a militant species that had tried to conquer their neighbors. Instead of destroying them, Alliance forces had disabled their war machine and then offered to help them redirect their energies toward more productive goals. The result had been remarkable. The Zarketh had channeled their warrior culture into exploration and research, becoming one of the Alliance's most effective rescue and emergency response teams. Their former enemies now called them for help during natural disasters and medical emergencies. "I received a message from Veltar yesterday," Zethkar mentioned as they walked through the gardens. His former aide had chosen to return to the Velthari homeworld to help establish their new democratic government. "How is the transition going?" "Better than expected. It seems that once people are given the chance to govern themselves, they are quite good at it." Zethkar paused beside a fountain where water danced in patterns that reflected light through his crystalline form. "I have been wondering about something, Admiral. Why did humanity choose to fight the hegemony, rather than simply hiding from us?" Chen considered the question for a long moment. "Because hiding would have meant abandoning everyone else to your rule. We could not save ourselves while leaving the rest of the galaxy to suffer. But you barely knew us. Why risk everything for strangers?" "Because they were not strangers," Chen replied. "They were people, and people deserve to be free." This simple statement embodied everything that made humanity different from the species that had come before them. The hegemony had seen other beings as subjects to be controlled or resources to be exploited. Humans saw them as neighbors who deserved the same rights and opportunities that they claimed for themselves. As they walked, Zethikar noticed a group of young beings from various species working together on some kind of project. They were building what looked like a miniature space station, complete with docking bays and habitat modules. "What are they doing?" he asked. "Planning their future," Chen replied with a smile. "That is a model of the first-generation ship designed by the Youth Alliance Council. They want to explore the areas beyond the galactic rim to find new worlds and maybe new species to invite into our community." Zethkar found this idea both thrilling and slightly terrifying. These young beings, barely adults by the standards of their species, were already thinking about expanding the Alliance beyond the known galaxy. They had inherited a universe where anything seemed possible. "Are you not concerned about what they might find out there?" he asked. "Of course," Chen admitted, "but concern is not the same as fear. We will prepare them as best we can, give them the tools and knowledge they need to succeed, and trust them to make good choices. That is what freedom means, the right to make your own mistakes and learn from them." They reached the central plaza of the Alliance complex where a memorial had been erected. It was not a monument to victory or conquest, but a simple wall of names. Every being who had died in the struggle to establish the Free Worlds Alliance. Human names were mixed with alien ones in a testament to the price of freedom. "Do you think it was worth it?" Zethkar asked quietly. "All the suffering, all the death, all the chaos of revolution?" Chen studied the memorial for a long moment before answering. "Ask me again in 100 years, she said finally. "When the children playing in these gardens are leading their own worlds, making their own choices, living their own lives without anyone's permission. Ask me when every species in the galaxy knows that they have the right to stand tall among the stars." A sound from above made them both look up. A ship was approaching the spaceport. Not a sleek human vessel or an elegant alien craft, but something that looked like it had been built by several different species working together. As it landed, the boarding ramp lowered to reveal a mixed crew of humans and aliens returning from some distant mission. "Where have they been?" Zethkar asked. "The Zerian system," Chen replied. "There was a plague outbreak on one of the farming worlds. The Alliance sent medical supplies and research teams to help develop a cure. This was what the new galaxy looked like. Not armies marching to conquer, but ships flying to heal. Not weapons designed to destroy, but tools created to build. Not emperors demanding submission, but neighbors offering help." As the sun set over New Geneva, painting the sky in colors that reminded Zethkar of his homeworld, he realized that the humans had given the galaxy something precious beyond measure. Not just freedom from the hegemony, but freedom to become something better than they had ever dreamed possible. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. Human or alien, he could not tell, and it did not matter. It was the sound of a future being born, a galaxy learning to live without fear, and a universe discovering that the greatest strength was not the power to rule, but the wisdom to serve. The age of empires was over. The age of alliance had begun, and in the gardens of Earth, under stars that now belonged to all the galaxy's children, Ambassador Zethkar finally understood what it meant to be free.